Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Cerberus at the Improv. I am Payman Ascari. I'm joined by my fellow co-host, Mr. Timothy Knight. Tim, how go things in your neck of the woods?
It is a stunningly gorgeous day out here in southwestern BC, and for a moment I was thinking I'd actually bring the laptop out onto the back deck because now we've moved into an actual house, but changed my mind at the last minute because I may or may not be wearing pants.
You made the right choice. I'm also joined by my other co-host, Mr. Andre Meloche. Andre, how's it going in that massive castle of yours?
Well, it's like Tim. I would have liked to bring my laptop outside, but mosquitoes were waiting for me. So I changed my mind. And because there are wildfire in Saskatchewan, now there was a small news in the Journal de Montréal in Quebec. We said, "Oh, Montreal is the worst city on the planet for hair quality. It's worse than India and China." So, and you see it today, it was quite in Montreal, a little bit foggy. We had a smog alert. So, and even we were advised to wear mask and get a 6 or 7 booster, I think, against wildfire. It's about the mood that I'm in now.
Yeah, oh man, the booster shots. What's going on over here with me? My parents aren't back yet, so I'm throwing house parties here. Any girls watching? I'm in the Horseshoe Bay. Come on over. Bring your own alcohol.
We just lost half our viewership.
It's going to be an all-guy show. Yeah.
Right? The He-Man Woman Haters Club.
Well, men's club were not admitting women until recently, 50, 60 years.
That's right.
And still in some club.
Yeah.
Freemason.
Yeah.
Really?
They don't accept women.
Never occurred to me. Not that I care. I don't think they'd ever extend an invitation to me. Not that I'm a woman.
It's not white enough.
Yeah, that's another thing. Not Christian enough.
Yeah.
All right, let's get on to our show.
The awkward silence as we run out of badly timed jokes.
The show, I swear, the show gets better.
No, it's because the show is over when you have a 5 or 10 second pause.
That's
it means
right.
The show is over.
Yeah.
Good night. Have a nice week.
Yeah, we're all. Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah.
We did 3 hours last week, so we cut
it
shorter this week.
Right.
We used up our quota for the month. So.
Yeah. Yeah, CBDC. You used up your podcast quota.
Okay, so today we're talking about, we have a very bold vision. We want to be able to tie all of the corruption, all the chaos in Canada to what's going on in the world. And I'm looking at you, Andre, to take the lead, because I don't know, I don't envy your job, but I mean, you had the King's Throne speech, you have the Alberta separation. Tim's got a really fantastic argument tying it all up to the First Nations and what's going to happen. Maybe we should go to you, Tim. What do you think is going to happen in the next 2 years?
I think the next 2 years is just going to be a continued slow burn. I agree with what Andre has said in previous episodes about 2028 being the timing for a critical, what I call that will turn the tide of a civilization, or like Canadian society. Let's just localize it. So, and Andre has mentioned some type of economic collapse, and he continues to hint to the 100-year anniversary of 1929. And that collapse that led into the Great Depression. Economists and the news, and even among circles like ourselves, have suggested that there have been deeper corrections in the stock market since 2029, but our economy has been robust enough to ride that out. Right, the 2008, I think it was a deeper and more dramatic loss in the stock market, but we were able to ride that out because of the maturity and the sophistication of world markets at that time. Andre suggested that what will happen in 28-ish will be so significant as to motivate a change in currency type, right? And so Andre has talked about hyperinflation and what that does to creating a cascading effect, right? So where I see us leading toward that point is, if I'm the other guys, I want to keep the pressure on. So you keep the pressure on, and then you have small crises. We solved it. Small crises. We solved it. Small crises. We solved it. See how good we are at doing this, and then oops, oh, but we've got it, right? Because it's all according to some type of liquid plan, right? So it's, while we can see their documentation by simply going to the UN website or the WF website or whatever, we can see we can read their books, right? Carney's book, etc., and we can see this, but it's not like a budget, right? It's a fluid document, right? It moves according to what needs to be done at the time. So as they take advantage of the panic or not panic that they're seeding into the people, wildfires, once upon a time we called them forest fires, right? Once upon a time we called them natural fires, and now the smarter ones among us call it arson season, right? Right. So it's so between what is it? Atmospheric rivers, right, and heat domes and fire season, right? So a larger population is becoming aware of this. So that means that they have to respond by increasing the pressure. You look at what the weatherman has been for a couple of years, participating in this madness by making everything shades of red on the weather map, right? Where 25 degrees suddenly is supposedly, sunburn temperatures, right? And so they'll keep the pressure on for the next couple of years. And that's why I think that what we do as the counterculture, I suppose we could call ourselves, as part of the counterculture, is in the real world, find ways to push back against that.
All right, that's not what I meant. I meant like your grand vision that you put a post out for. But we'll come back to you, Andre.
Well,
How do you
my
think
grand vision is stitched back in later after Andre does his bit.
All right, Andre, how does this tie to Ukraine, European Union, I don't know, Middle East?
Well, I will just react to what Tim was saying, because in his great, I would say, speech or great comment that he made on Telegram with us, he was talking about revolution and counter-revolution. So I think it's important. What he's mentioning is they're keeping up the pressure to confuse people. That's the first thing that I want to say. Related to Ukraine or related to global politics, I read an article today from a retired Indian diplomat. I will say his name. It is Mr. Badra Kumar. And I follow him since a couple of years, and he's always very moderate about what is happening, trying to see through the filter of propaganda. And he's pro-Russian. He doesn't hide it, but he's pro-Russian in the sense that he's not advocating for a war. He's trying to see a more diplomatic approach. And in the article that he wrote, I think it was last week, he was very angry about what's happening. Because when the Ukrainian army, if I can use the expression quote unquote, quote, when they attacked the strategic bombers of Russia, they attacked the nuclear triad. And after that, there was a conversation between Trump and Vladimir Putin. And when you understand the level of stupidity of the Ukrainian regime, you ask yourself, what is the real motive behind that? They want to continue war. And I can say they want to continue war on both sides. It's quite fascinating because Russia is winning. And Russia, with their memorandum on peace, there's a list of requirements. And they are not addressed at all, neither by Keith Kellogg, who's for me is a puppet, but neither by Trump or even Mark Rubio. And you understand very well on the side of Ukraine, they're fueling the conflict, and they don't want to have a peace agreement. So when we look at what is happening now, the crisis is amplifying. Not to the advantage of Kiev, because it is not a structure. It is not a sovereign country. We can even relate this to Canada. Are we? Is Canada a sovereign country when we have the speech of throne, and they didn't even vote on it? There was a post from I would say, the anonymous man whose name is Pierre Poliver, who said we will oppose the speech of Trump. You cannot oppose, man. You're not in the House. You're watching the Parliament debate on a TV in the Tim Hortons in Ottawa. You're not invited in, so you cannot go and vote. And it is, and they accepted the speech of Trump like it is fait accompli in French. Nobody questioned that. I'm just saying, do we have a parliament? Do we have a government? Do we have an opposition? Do we have a country? So when you look at the global politics, I see that there's a big, I would say it is more than national. And the fact that Mark Carney is having an authoritarian style shows that he wants to have what we were talking about, authoritarian or autocratic governance. And it is copying the governments of Russia, because Russia is an autocratic government. It was always like that. It's even if we think about Soviet Union, we think about what happened since Vladimir Putin is in power. It is still an autocratic. You cannot talk about democracy. You can talk about a parliament that exists, the Duma, but the democracy in Russia, no. Just like it does not exist here in reality. In theory, we have a constitution. In theory, we have laws. We have a parliament, but in practice, there's no accountability first, and there was no vote. So I will end on that, the first comment, because I think Tim is right. Revolution, counter-revolution, that will destroy the structure. We think about the counter-revolution Trotsky, and then after that, repression or revolution, but an economic revolution, CBC, UBI, 15-minute city, and that's the agenda 2030 of the United Nations. So in my opinion, when you look at the higher picture, the plan is going on.
Yeah. So two thoughts on my end to add to that. The first one is Carney must be Machiavellian in his first year. He must do the hard, ugly stuff first. The shock and awe politically must happen first. And Andre pointed that out. Right. And so that means that when all of that is in place next year and everybody's been bowed under to it, they'll forget by the time you get into this a year later, because being human, that's what we'll do. So we will repress the pain later. So he gets the hard, ugly stuff done now. My other thought goes back to Ukraine and Russia. And I'm always thinking, where is the match historically? Where can we superimpose what happened before with what's happening today? And I'm always very interested in psychological motivations, why people do the things the way they do. So this thought occurred to me is, and this is just a question, it's just a hypothetical, I just thought of it now. Is Ukraine equal to the Arabian resistance and Russia equal to the Ottomans? You have to think about that for a second, because it's a reversal.
Can you repeat the question? Is Ukraine
equal to the Arabian resistance?
You mean Palestinian and Gaza?
No, the Arabian. Go back to Lawrence, the First World War. Let's go.
Okay, well, that's more complicated. Okay,
right. So, right, it is more complicated. But you go back to the First World War.
Yes.
And the Allied nations were putting extensive pressure and input onto the Arabian peoples, the resistance, to fight without any support, right? But they wanted the Arabian resistance to fight the Ottomans, and to see where I'm going. Yes. And the Ottomans are Russia, and the Arabian resistance is the Ukraine. So then what ends up happening afterwards is, beyond all the promises to give Arabia freedom and to the access to their own destiny, the PICO, I don't remember the name of the treaty.
Yes, I remember
Right,
this.
right. That's split the Arabian lands into a French half and the British half.
Yes,
And is
for
that
example, Lebanon
NATO,
and Syria.
right?
Yes.
Right. And is that NATO's goal with the Ukraine? Do you end up with a Eastern Ukraine and a Western Ukraine?
Well, I read an article. I read an article today. It's an article that was written by Alexander Dugin in 2022 about the status of Ukraine. That was a buffer zone between what they call the heartland, which would
Yeah.
be the Russian Empire, and the Ramland. Sorry for the pronunciation, which would be the Atlantic Empire, like Great Britain and the colony. It is naval, and there's always this buffer. Start with Ukraine and all the ex-Soviet Union republic, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and they say it's this buffer that is always serving as a way to increase your zone of influence. What you're mentioning, you can integrate again Middle East, because Lebanon, Syria, they were part of it. So I think it was Balfour agreement.
Yeah, the Balfour.
And splitting, for example, Syria and Lebanon. Lebanon was the French protectorate, and Syria and the rest of the I would say Jordan was the British protectorate. But that was just before the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Mm-hmm. When you refer to Ukraine today, they use a different vocabulary or narrative. In 2020. Zelensky said that he wanted to make Ukraine the greater Israel. So it's a significant difference between 1918, because let's not forget 1918, Israel did not exist. Israel was created in 1948 by the United Nations. So today the situation has changed, but I think the goals are the same. It's two empires that are clashing together. And you have regional power, but you have also what I call mercenaries. United States, the power never really shifted from Great Britain to United States. I think they delegated the mercenary goals to United States, because I will refer again to Donald Trump or his administration. There's no diplomacy there. So why I go back to this Indian retired diplomat, it's because he was very angry, saying, what is happening now? We will see the clash. But it doesn't stop, neither on the side of Russia, because Russia, Putin this week declared, and I quote, he said, Kiev is turning into a terrorist state, Ukraine. And I will refer to me, if I was a journalist, I would ask to Vladimir Putin, I would say, in 2002, when you had the conflict in Chechnya, you said, we don't negotiate with terrorists. Does that mean that you will not negotiate with Zelensky? And right. Even Zelensky doesn't want to negotiate with Putin. So you're stuck in a dead end, and they stay on their position. Last week, just the day before the attack on the nuclear triad, there was an exchange in Istanbul of 6,000 prisoners. 6,000 Russian, not prisoner, dead body. They were giving them to Ukraine soldiers that are dead. They exchanged that, and that was a 300 million burden on the Ukrainian finance, because they have to pay pension to those widows, and they were not very happy about it. The other thing is that Kiev was always complaining that Russia kidnapped 20,000 children. And the list, when it happened, you could have seen the face of the Russian diplomat. He was very happy to have the paper. And he said, we finally have the list from Kiev. It is 360 children. It's not 20,000. So they both play it's like the show of diplomacy. It's a show. It doesn't mean that it's not important, because those 6,000 died soldiers, they were sent back to Ukraine so they could be burial. They could be buried. Their family can mourn their loss. But And the children, it's the same thing. But it's like that's the facade. Behind that, something is much more complicated. And I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure what it is today.
I kind of let me give my view, sort of to bring it back to what we're trying to do this episode, which is, like what's going on in the world, tie it all together. How does it relate to Canada? The West has just been drifting more and more to the left. And I think what we're calling globalists, sometimes we mean like the elites, like the Klaus Schwabs, but just the people who see themselves as global citizens, they're like extreme dyed-in-the-wool leftists. And they're all over the world. I think in 2020, the people that rejected globalism, they basically stole Donald Trump's election. So the globalists stole the election from Donald Trump because they don't like the ones that are the opposite of globalism, the populists, the nationalists, the sovereigntists. And now Trump is back. He's back with a vengeance. He started this war, let's call it with the City of London, the globalists. And the globalists, as Tim kind of expertly pointed out, they've come back. They've flown the king into Canada to reclaim their territory. They're saying, we're making a stand here. Canada is Ukraine 2.0. So whereas Ukraine, you had boots on the ground, you got dead bodies. I think Canada, they're just going to be like, you know what, we'll use it as a wedge in the door to prevent the Americans from being able to. And again, Tim will go into this, but this whole sort of manifest destiny in this hemisphere. And why I mentioned the globalists at the beginning, the leftists, those people, it's all over the world now. Like the entire world is a battleground. South Korea it fell to a left-leaning government. I think Poland is going right-leaning. I don't know if this is chess or checkers, but like you're trying to get more red pieces on than black pieces. Let's go to you, Tim.
Yeah, by putting the phrase Ukraine 2.0 on Canada, that's interesting. I haven't processed that at all. So basically, going back to my earlier rant that ended up on X, we're moving toward going back to Andre's point about some form of economic collapse or crisis in 2028. Use that to introduce universal basic income, and it will be easy to do that in Canada because you target pensioners, people on disability, and people on various types of social welfare benefits, because these groups are already being paid directly into their bank account from Bank of Canada, Government of Canada, or the government of the province in which they live. These payment systems already exist, right? So it's not that it's a no-brainer, it's that it will be seamless to introduce universal basic income into these systems, and that will unify the process at a bureaucratic and budgetary level. So the people they target first won't feel the downline sting until later. Some might, who are making like larger pensions, might lose some of that. So talk about egalitarian, when this is the Carney thing, right? Your house has too much equity. You need to share that with the rest of because that be a good socialist. So people making too much pension will be brought down to a level, and then people making too little pension will be elevated up to X level. So let's say it's a flat $2,000, which is interesting that was the Canadian emergency benefit payment. And that's intentional. That was a test. That's a stress test. Can we execute a payment system that will do this nationwide? And they can. So people making less than 2,000 or X will be brought up to that level. People making more than that will be brought down to that level. And that's just too bad. So then they'll bring in some other type of price controls in order to offset this thing. Rental price controls and stuff like that are already in place. So it's merely a matter of stitching pieces together to make universal basic income happen as seamlessly as possible. So then you have your economic crisis continues or is slowly abated. The next election, 2029, 2030, central bank digital currency becomes the obvious election topic, because that's where they want to go. And so Andre talks about the double dip in stock market curves, right? Stock market lines. Then you can use that double dip effect, right? So the first spike or the first loss is introduce UBI, and then the second or the rebound loss is convert everybody to central bank digital currency. And if that all happens in Canada by 2030 or thereabouts, the model for the rest of the planet is finished.
Well, it is
Can
funny what you're meant. Go ahead,
I,
Tim. Sorry.
I wanted a follow-up question from Tim before we leave. You had a theory about this too. How is immigration going to factor into this?
Immigration. So migrants, immigrants, refugees, et cetera, they're all automatically put into the direct to bank payment system. That's the look at all the ads that were popping up from banks all over, all kinds of various marketing media that were specifically targeting new residents of Canada to set up their bank accounts and everything, because this is a coordinated effort between the major bank executives, the Bank of Canada, and the government of Canada, in order to integrate new residents. Let's just be politically correct, right? New residents into the economic gears of the Canadian system. They come in knowing you're here because we, the government, brought you here. When the time comes, you will mark your X in the appropriate place. And if that number continues, even at a 2% rate, you're still going to meet their 100-year goals. They're not in a rush, right? They're not in a rush. The only rush is to get ready for Web 3.0, which is 2030.
Sorry, Andre, go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I want to react to what Tim said. He was talking about, your flat or your apartment or your house is too big. I would advise people to read the short story of Mikhail Bulgakov, Art of Dog. It's the story of a surgeon who finds a dog, a street dog, and he does a surgery. It's in Soviet Union time, 1920. And the dog start to think, and he transform himself into a man. But it's funny because the man is a bourgeois doctor, surgeon. He has a big flat, and suddenly the leader of the kolkhoz of the Communist Party knocks at his door. He said, "You have a 4-room flat. Now you have to share it with somebody else. It is too big." And the tendency is there. If there's a revolution, you cut the head of everything that goes over a certain level.
Yeah.
Behind what we're seeing is the spectrum or the spectrum of totalitarianism. Totalitarianism means total. One government, no opposition or regional branches. And it is not new. Solzhenitsyn wrote of the First Circle, and he makes Stalin talking in his novel, and Stalin is thinking about, I will be recognized as the great leader, but when I will die, maybe God. It is supposed to be an atheist country or regime, but he's thinking about God. So the idea is always to go to concentrate. That's why I think Tim is right. Revolution wants to deprive the actual power from the power, and to seize the power and use it for their own interest. So I think he's right, but it's a theoretical plan. In my opinion, it will not work. Human creativity will fight back, and I think that people are starting to waking up. Maybe not a lot of people, but you will have 10-15% of the people who will resist. Then after that, can we go to what we call a civil war or civil disobedience or insurrection? I don't know, but if they implement in 2028 UBI, they will have to provoke a crisis, an economic crisis. And let's not forget, $36 trillion in United States for 400 million of population, and you have $1.3 trillion. And with what Carney is putting now, 60 billion more for 2025, for a population of 41 million, the burden on future generation is incredible. The debt is cancer. And they keep on doing it because one day They enslave you with the debt, and you are a society of tenants, just exactly like in Soviet Union. And 60% of the population in Germany, they don't own the property. 60%, that's a lot. That's a lot. So you can imagine, if you are already used to not having a private property, it means private property means free speech. And if you don't have that, you don't have free speech. So they will still continue to go slowly until they can hit, I would say, the final blow.
Yeah. So going back to what might be the crisis, I think the crisis is in part two elements. And one is the hyperinflation problem, which is debt related, but also by intentionally increasing the volume of currency in the closed system, right, which deflates the value of everything. And the second is the housing crisis, in part caused by a banking system that will not relinquish its chokehold on homeowners and mortgage owners. So you look at, there are town intersections all across Canada, like on highway interchanges and whatnot, parks and whatnot, where the people who 5 years ago were little tent communities, right, 20 tents all sitting up and whatnot, and then homeless. Now, those areas are converting, the ones along the freeways. I can, right here in the valley, I can point to them. The police have kicked out all the tents, but what have moved in? RVs. It's astonishing. You're not homeless and own an RV. You're not. You are a homeowner who lost their home and are now living in an RV.
They lost
And there
their
are
land.
entire micro communities of people who've sprung up along, like the oh my goodness, the rest stops along the Trans-Canada. Entire rest stop parkade areas that they've turned into little mobile hometowns. It's astonishing. So this continued crisis, and now Carney introduces what's her name? The vice president, the presidential run of the States. What's her name?
Kamala Harris?
Harris. I'm sorry, Harris. What she called unrealized capital gains. And Carney has adopted that.
Oh, yes.
Wholesale. He's adopted it wholesale. Unrealized capital gains. So working with the Bank of Canada, which more or less directs the big six, not quite as much of a hold on the unions the credit unions, because their membership have more influence, but still going to have an influence. You work down through that chain to where you maintain a interest and payment management system that does not let off the gas. When Carney says your home is worth $1 million, you bought it for $600,000, so that $400,000 is $200,000 above and they will arbitrarily set some type of line where you are now a good citizen. Because he said flat out, if you have too much money in your home, you're not being a good citizen and you will have to share it with everybody else. He said that flat out, totally Leninized it flat out. So when that happens, people are going to lose their home. Then what? So psychologically, what's happening is people who you mentioned, owning land gives you free speech, because that's how you pay for it, right? And you're right. Because if I have influence, I can speak. And how do I have influence? I own property, right? I have something of value that someone else might want to come into an agreement with, and that gives me a voice. So it's all contractual. And so if I can separate homeowners from their homes and turn them into renters, now you've got your Germany at,
Well, it's interesting what you're mentioning, because a mobile home in the 70s, people were buying those mobile homes. It's like this very, very big trailer. It's a semi-trailer, 40 feet long. And they were supposed, and they were installing those mobile homes on land that was rented. But to avoid paying tax at first, they were keeping the wheel on the mobile home, because they could move them. But Slowly they started to change, and they start to put foundation and to put and they started to pay municipal tax, but they were renting the land. What you're referring to with RV, it is interesting because 5 years ago this phenomenon started in the United States. They were going into rest stop, and they were connecting their RV to electrical outlet, and they were connected with sanitary and everything. And they were supposed to be there for 1 week, but they just moved place in the same rest area, and they started to be to build a certain community. They didn't have land, but they have a home, and they were, and it was a phenomenon that I observed about 5 years ago, to a little bit before the pandemic started. So what we're seeing now, it's exactly that. People there. I remember it 3 years ago when it was this COVID mandate, and I was very angry. I said to my wife, we will sell the house and we will move to Alberta, and I will buy an RV. And I was checking the price of RV at the time. They skyrocketed because people were, like you say, they were losing their home, but they were still able to sell it and keep, let's say, $200,000-300,000. Not enough to keep the house, but enough to buy a good RV. And then you can just go around. It becomes a country of nomadism. Nomadism.
And if you're a nomad, you have no land.
And you have no land.
I support having an RV if you own the land, but if you're desperate and you're forced to sell your home and you're living in an RV, you downsize. The next step is a tent.
There was a man. It was in France. There was a man. He has a land of about 10 acres. For about 15 years, he goes there. It is wood, and it is residential zone. And he decided to put an RV on the land, and not even drilling a well. It's not important. Just because he wants to go there, it's his land. The city forced him to remove the RV because they said you cannot live on that land. Either you build a house. So they forced him.
But that's the house. That's because we're entering clown world. I was meeting with my friend yesterday. Again, liberals up, elbows up, liberal voter. He's. I shouldn't be mean to him. He might be watching this. I don't know who he voted for.
I hope he is.
He demolished his house. So when you demolish your house, as per the bylaws, you have to pay BC Hydro to come and cut off your power, and then you need temporary power for your power tools. So you have to pay BC Hydro again to come establish your temporary power. But you need a permit to do that, and you can't. He went to request the permit. You have to wait until after you've disassembled the power, and they're like, "Oh, we have a 1 month backlog." These people, like, they're completely detached from reality because the money's coming in. No one's going to stop paying their property tax.
1 month backlog in Quebec with Hydro-Quebec. Since the pandemic and the speculation on the housing market, you have some people who built a summer house, say they pay $700,000 because they have money, they retire, they live either in Montreal or in Quebec, or they built in a new development. Hydro-Quebec has a backlog of 18 months. Some people, they have to buy generator because they will not be connected to the grid before 18 months. And they're very angry because the promoter who sold them, let's say it is a 6-story building with condos, or let's say it is a project where you have 6 summer houses that are beautiful around the lake, they're not connected to the grid. You can imagine that. You arrive with the $700,000 and Hydro-Quebec tells you, no problem, we have your demand. It's an 18 months backlog, but you promised us that we would be connected. Yes, but we cannot do it. And no accountability. And people are very angry because you have a certain category of people, 56, 60, 65, who wants to go away from big center, and they're stuck. So you say 1 month backlog. But it shows the heavy tendency what Tim was talking about, the burden on the economy, how they are depriving slowly people from their property, their free speech. We can talk about Bill 63 eventually, but they keep on pressuring people. Even if people are angry, how can they protest? Do we have any leverage of mechanism? The answer is no. We don't have any. Even the MP did not vote on the speech of throne this week. What happened? Nobody's questioning. It's like we're going to summer now. It will be summer break, summer vacation.
Yeah.
They vote on a budget on a proposition.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Watch how this happens. So here is the Canadian citizen, and here are new residents. Let's just use that term. So the Canadian citizen is exorbitantly funding the new residents. They are getting all of the services and access and availability and subs that any Canadian citizen has gotten, but through actually having to go work for it for a period of time. So the Canadian citizen loses influence, is losing their jobs to DEI, is losing their ability to mobility due to excessive taxation, is losing their house, and they're getting better houses because they're buying the foreclosed houses at below market prices because they do. And slowly you're in an RV, and slowly you're renting in subsidized housing, and these people own the housing, and they're now the large body of investors because they've used all your money. And by the time you've got no money to give to them, they control the system. And then they say, oh, Happy Mubarak, pay dimitude or become our new labor force. And because you've been living in a tent for 3 months, you choose to become the new labor force. That's called replacement population theory.
I just want to add one thing. That upside down flag that's just right behind Tim, that's the elites. That's the government. They don't go anywhere. They don't give a damn if it's, the former population or the new one. They're still there. It doesn't affect them.
Yeah. So
Tim is right. It's communication.
Sue's comments about the religious influence. The religious influence is a weapon to prevent soft-bellied Westerners from wanting to cause to say something against someone else's religion because we don't want to be considered bad people. Meanwhile, it's not the people so much. It'll be, like extremists or devotees in those different religions that will, but it's the government using it on purpose to keep us from protesting along and bringing up the religious commentary. And so that becomes a weapon that is weaponized as well.
I want to jump in here. Sorry, just real quick. The COVID era, I think they just went so far so quickly. It's almost a mini world war. Like, how world wars, there's a justification for them, and they massively changed society. COVID kind of did that, but there was no impetus, and the people rebelled. And I think they're going to slow it down a little bit. So Carney is not going to go as crazy as Trudeau did, but they're still going in the same direction. They're still heading towards authoritarianism.
Yeah, Alex Jones called it InfoWars.
I would like to you to bring the comment of Sue, the last comment that she put on, because what you're not this one, the other one before, if you have it. No, about religion.
Oh.
The second last.
Okay, those at the top have no religion, and will use inserting religion and cultural division. I always refer to Michael Jones, what he calls is in his book Libido Dominandi, sexual liberation and political control. Political control meaning control of minorities. You control them with their emotion, and then you can use them as weapon. That's the first thing. The second thing is, it is not a Canadian or a Western phenomenon. Actually, in Russia, the housing industry is collapsing because the prime rate of the central bank of Russia is 22%. So you can imagine there's no building company who are building anymore because they cannot take the risk of borrowing money and trying to sell flat or houses. And it's most of all, it is flat in Russia. When you look at this, it is the same tendency. They use the housing crisis as a leverage. And yes, it's true. The top of the top of the pyramid, they have no religion. It's a cult. They use the tools of the governments like democracy. They use it as a weapon. They use it to oppose people. I like the idea what Tim is mentioning. It's not you call them. Let's not call people immigrants, but let's call them new resident. They arrive here. I think for the vast majority, even if we think about mass immigration, they have good intention. In a way, they want to improve their way of life, but they are instrumentalized and they are used as a weapon. And the government or the instant at the top, they use all of us as weapon all the time. Maybe that's why we have those type of conversation about how we can inspire Canadian, not to antagonize other people, to try to understand the position of the other person. I know it is not easy because we practically live in ghettos now. We practically live in ghettos, and it's difficult to reach other people with other culture and even other language. Some people they don't speak French nor English, so how can you reach them? And what is fascinating when I see this, it's because what is happening in Canada now, yes, it's that the plan is continuing, but the plan slowed down not because Carney wants to slow down. I think he doesn't have the choice. It's a high historic event that we're seeing now. The historic shift where we will see maybe two great superpower and maybe three with China who will start to reshape all the global or the geography or global politics. And we will see it. It will not take 5 years. It will not take 5 years. I think it will take 1 or 2 years, and yes, maybe three maximum. And you will see a new geography.
Yeah.
And after that, it will be fixed. When I was looking at the front, the border of Ukraine, Ukraine was created officially in 1928 by 1922 by Lenin, and after that in 1954 Khrushchev gave Crimea to Ukraine, and you had Gorbachev who took the top part of Ukraine, which is Kharkov, and they start. You look at the map and you say what we know as Ukraine today did not exist before 1922. Yes, the Ukrainian. Ukrainian word means to be far. And you think when you look at the map, it's the same thing with Middle East, Lebanon. I had a conversation 20 years ago with a Lebanese man who was talking about the Great Syria. Lebanon did not exist in reality. It was the Great Syria and the Phoenician before that. So what we're seeing now, I would say if people were intelligent in Canada, we would have this North American or this American alliance with 50 states and 13 province and territory, with a great alliance, with a great constitution, a national policy that would be in harmony with our neighbors instead of being conflictual. I think we will see something happening within 3 years. It will not take 5 years. Maybe it will not be pleasant, but it will happen, in my opinion.
So I'm frantically writing notes on the side. So allow me to write my notes.
Sure.
Emotional control of minorities, you mentioned, has been tested first with truth and reconciliation theory. Yes?
Yes, you're right. You're right, and it is an old process.
Right. So the government has been abusing its relationship and responsibility towards Canadian Indigenous peoples with manipulation of the truth and reconciliation. Not just the idea of reconciliation as a whole or the truth of revealing history, but the manipulation of the whole thing on both sides. And another thought too is tribal prejudice is transformed into alt-right racism.
Yes, that's
right?
that's a very
So,
good
right,
observation.
right. So what I've noticed in my community, and there's a marked increase in people from other nationalities coming into the city, a marked, visible, measurable increase in the last 2 years. By and large, they're just integrating. Like you said, they just want a better life, and so these are the people who agree with, they bought what they've been told. Come to Canada, you'll have a better life, and they're just seem to be integrating well. And there, I mean, I see handfuls. In particular, the young 20-something men are quite what tribal. Let's put it that way,
Yes.
gang-like in some senses, right? But by and large, the young families and the mature individuals that come in, they're integrating. But this foisting of racial tension, the overuse of the word and the concept by the media, you can't walk down your street and see someone from the Sudan walking with his family without immediately having angst. You will immediately feeling the alien tension, and
That's
that's
the feeling.
right.
That's
Feeling.
psychological
It
feeling.
may not be the truth, but it is certainly the feeling. And today, where the medium is the message and perception is reality, when you're constantly under that cortisone pressure, right? Not straight up adrenaline, but that low level pressure, it is not hard to push you into an extremist position. Not hard, because you're basically in a famine position. You're in a famine position. You know that the resources aren't there, whatever it is. You know the peace is not there, whatever it is, or at least you have the perception that it isn't. And the government is satisfied. The government is satisfied to allow that to happen. Yes, that this is a direct effect of the complete collapse of our justice system, because the gangbangers, and let's just use that phrase, have no fear of the law. They have no fear of the law because they'll be tossed out on the street later. And we are going to end up with, and I've already had to varying degrees. I'm going to use the word wrong. I totally am. Crystal knocked. Was that what 2000 and when Merkel first let in the first wave of Syrian refugees, and there was a mass.
2011.
Yeah, 2011, right? So yeah, and there were like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rapes in one night, and the police in the country did nothing about it. It
Well,
became public not too long after, and there was no outrage,
you
like
can
no
see.
public outrage.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you can see now in Syria, under the I would say the presidency of Jolani, who was a member of Al Qaeda, thousands of Christians are slaughtered. Do we hear this on social media or on mainstream media? Nothing, practically nothing. One thing you mentioned, Tim, about psychological behavior. In 2011, my wife arrived here in 2013. She's from Russia. She's from Soviet Union. She integrated. She's a Canadian citizen, adopted Canadian citizen. And in 2013, we met a couple from Chile who were here. They arrived 1 year before. They were taking French course with my wife, and they were so disappointed because when they arrived here, they said, "Oh, we thought Quebec was the Switzerland of North America." And I was, "What are you talking about?" They had a restaurant in Chile. They were quite wealthy, and they moved here. They could not find a job, and they were very disappointed. Why I talk about this? It's because psychological behavior. At the time, that was 12 years ago. I come from a place where I work with many people from different countries. Iran, Africa. At Hydro-Quebec, we had a policy of hiring people who are competent. And at the time, I had a certain behavior. Today, my psychological behavior has changed. I see a black people in my small city and I react interiorly. And I have to fight against this. I have to tell myself, do not focus on the color. This is what we would call racism. And I understand, and I analyze myself, in the last 12 years, and I see how it changed. And I can understand people when they see foreigner arriving, not integrating, not speaking the language, living in ghettos, living really in ghettos among themselves. I would live in Iran. I don't speak Farsi. I would probably reach for Quebecers or French people who speak the language like me, or that's natural. But one day you have to get out of your ghetto and you have to try to not breed, but mix. I think it is not happening. And my behavior has changed. And I noticed that. And I told myself, I can imagine people who are, and I'm a retired person. I don't see a lot of people. You can imagine you take the public transport every day and you see people who arrive here, they behave badly, they have no civism, they don't respect the law, they don't respect even each other sometimes. We see a lot of ugly videos on social media. And I go to this comment of Sue, women are not safe anymore. How can you live in a country when you cannot go at night after 10 o'clock? Because you're afraid. My wife, she experienced and lived perestroika. She was telling me in 1993, 1994, the level of criminality was so high that nobody was going out after 7 o'clock, and especially women. What we're seeing now in Canada is something that is, we see the symptom of it. And she was telling me, I will end on this, she was telling me, Soviet Union people or East European people who immigrate in Canada and are here since 20, 25 years, they see it. Canadian, they don't see this. They recognize the symptom. And it is quite disturbing.
Where do I jump in? I never go out, and I just happened to go out on Thursday. So I was downtown Vancouver, and I had to be around a whole bunch of liberals. I don't think this is really a problem for them. Like, the demographics changing. There's so many East Indians in Canada now. For a while it was Chinese, like Asian, but now it's East Indian. They're everywhere. But I think the urban centers, they look at that and they're like, great, more food options. Diversity is our strength. And it's almost like I don't even blame the immigrants themselves. I think society is crumbling. And immigration is a symptom of that because they need to bring in money to invest in the country. So, which is why there's like 50 million new Tim Hortons owners. I don't know who's paying for these donuts.
Mark, payment me. I have a question for you. When you go out in Vancouver, you say I go in a place where there's a lot of liberal. It's quite a wealthy environment. If you go in a more popular and poor environment, it's not the same picture, I suppose.
You mean from the people, like the Canadians in the poor environments that have to deal with the more poor immigrants?
Well, maybe the level of criminality. If you say you're a liberal, wealthy person, and you will say, okay, I have more food option, more restaurant. It's nice, diversity is nice, okay. But if you go to more poor neighborhood, maybe it's more complicated.
Well, because they're the ones that are the recipients of the pain, I guess.
Yes.
The rich, they always get hit last when it comes to these stuff. They're in their gated communities, and the immigrants don't come to their neighborhoods anyway. They don't steal their jobs. They're making money off of previous generations, so they don't feel it.
Suburbia won't feel this, not yet.
Yeah, and they're the bastards that are the root cause of these bad policies. So as the saying goes, they're not subject to the ramifications of their own ideology.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Right, not yet, because suburbia is so into plastic money that when the government does find out how to get the CRA to wrap their fingers around your unrealized capital gains for your house, then you're cooked. So it's interesting that the separation between the rich and the poor is not the lower level of the middle class falling out. They take the entire class and push it down. Because if those near the top are losing their homes, you can be guaranteed the ones at the bottom are already living in RVs on the corners of on the intersections of major highways, right? So you move the entire middle class structure down at the same time. So eventually you have two types of people. You have the 2%, then we go back to 1984, the 2% who are in the party, right? And they're the ones who get beat up the most. And the other 98%, which are the little old washerwoman hanging her laundry out underneath, the room where Smith and Jane, I think was her name, or Julie, right? So they snuck off and found a room off in one of the small ghettos on the edge of town. There's the washerwoman, who's the other 98%. She represents the 2 minutes of rage. So she represents the entirety of the rest of the serfdom, right? And that's the direction that this, I'm not saying it's where it's going, but this is the potential. So when in my little rant that ended up on X, I closed saying we have about 2.5 years to stop this. So most of my conversation moving forward, most of my plans, my ideology, my ideas moving forward are going to be, how do I take these ideas and put them into practical activity on the street? Because we must do something. We can't just be talking. We can't just be talking heads, ranting on X or whatever it is we're doing. We also must be educating, activating people to do something in their lives that will forestall or prevent this from happening.
Well,
Tim,
I can tell you one
sorry,
thing.
before we go on, Tim, you got something on the bottom of the screen. I don't know if it's your laptop. If you can just fix that, if possible.
Oh, that's my laptop.
You're talking about, Tim, you're talking about doing something.
Yeah.
This week, my wife and I, we planted 100 plants in our garden. We do this since 12 years. And why I say this is because I was a senior advisor at Hydro-Quebec. I was, when I retired, it was not because I wanted to be lazy and watch Netflix. I never watched it anyway. But the idea, and I don't have a TV, but the idea was I had to reconstruct the house here practically by myself. And my wife, because she comes from Soviet Union, we started to do a garden. We do canning every year, 250 pots. Why I say this is because food supply, food independence, the fact that you have quality food. I learned a lot. I'm not a farmer. I'm a city man, and we're still making a lot of mistakes. But like you said, I think it's important for people to act locally, to support each other and not depend on the government. My wife was telling me today, because of the interest rate in Russia, 22%. People, the building company, they didn't want to build, and the government should do something. I said, you think like a Soviet Union people. It's not up to the government to do something. It's up to the people to do something, and the government is supposed to help them by lowering tax, reducing bureaucracy, and letting people be free to start businesses and to live. And this is where we are now, and we have this tendency of always falling back on what we call the insurance, which is the welfare state, that I called in one of my essays farewell state. The farewell state means that maybe we should be a little bit more quote unquote libertarian. We should be more free, but more responsible also. And maybe that's why many people are not responsible, so they cannot be free. You have the duty that goes with the freedom. Sorry, Payman.
No, it's okay. I wanted to let's go back to this concept of how does Canada fall into this grand global strategy. Tim, you brought up the issue of unrealized gains and the wiping out of the middle class. I feel like there's this giant vacuum cleaner that they're putting all over Canada, and it's sucking all the wealth out of the country. Where is this going? Is this interest payments that are going to the banks, the international banks?
What Andre said, we're losing $80 billion a year in debt interest.
75, something like that.
Right. And in the last 4 years, we've sent more than $80 billion to the Ukraine. And they've admitted that out loud. So if they admit that out loud, how much more in other arrangements has moved in?
Like I said, to Panama with a pit stop in Ukraine.
Right. So, and the Crown came and gave a speech that said Canada would be playing a key role in European the European military force and defense. So that means what? Does that mean that now the Britain is saying you will give your 2% to NATO and you'll deal with it, or
5%?
5%? They've never even given 1%. They brag about 2 being the minimum.
On paper, it works. On paper, it works very well. Very well.
Trudeau's elbows weren't up. This is different.
Right?
This is Carney.
So what I'm saying is the Crown has said that Canada is going to be a major player in European defense and whatnot. The point is, they're not saying they're going to spend more money for local defense, other than to admit that they're going to do work in the Northwest Passage, right? And we can talk later about the 3 deep water ports. Right? So that would be Baffin near Iqaluit, I believe, and another one more toward the west in the Yukon and Alaska region. So the only reason that the Crown is bringing those up, which Harper talked about back 15 years ago or so now, but the only reason that's coming up as a matter of the Crown and the budget speech, because it was a budget speech, is because Trump has made posturing regarding the Northwest Passage and Greenland. So this is the Crown pissing on its tree to make sure that the other dogs recognize the smell and stay off their territory. That's what that comes down to. But there's no promise that we are spending more on our own defense. The promise is we are spending more to defend Europe, which is exactly what we were told 2 wars ago and did without question.
Well,
so, conscription is coming.
Well, that's interesting what you're mentioning, because 2 weeks ago I had an interview with Matthew Harrett, and he wrote an article about the pipeline that would go from west to east and through Russia. And Alexander II in 19th century agreed on that pipeline, and Nicola II agreed, and it was, if I'm not wrong, I think it was Diefenbaker who was negotiating with the Russian at the time with an international pipeline. That was more than 100 years ago. Can you imagine what they're talking about? Let's say NATO, defending Europe, the freedom, democracy. It's a posture. 5% of what? Of printing money. There's no industrial process that backs this, because the economy of the Western world is financialized. It's not solid. Maybe Carney has an idea to reindustrialize the economy, because now it's only a cartel of central bank. There's no process except for Alberta, which is quite solid with the natural resources. Outside of that, what do you have? Quebec hydroelectricity. Oh yes, they want to invest now $200 billion in Quebec, but you have to do what? Windmill and solar power plant. This is a joke. And hydroelectricity is practically completely developed in Quebec. So you don't have any leverage outside of natural resource, gas and oil, and industrial process like aluminum, steel. But you have to rebuild this. It was destroyed with the financiarization of the economy. So if you want to do this, you need an authoritarian structure. It struck me yesterday when I was reading the article, and I was thinking about Russia. Russia is still the economy is still based on industry, and they're nationalizing some companies because they want to control the process, the industrial process. They control it from top to bottom, from the beginning till the end. So their idea of rebuilding an empire needs an authoritarian or autocratic structure. If you don't have this, you don't control your industrial process. I think it is an idea of an empire. Carney is arrive with an autocratic structure, saying, okay, forget about democracy. We will give you welfare, but you will not have free speech, but you will eat. and we will manage the level. And I think they're thinking like empire, not anymore like what we call a sovereign state.
So this is Rome's bread dole.
I think so. I think so. So the idea of democracy or state nation will just disappear slowly.
I compare it more to the Soviet Union. You mentioned they're financializing the economy. So in the Soviet Union, they get water from Armenia, they get food from Ukraine, and I think here what their vision is, why don't we be the banks, because banks are clean, they're green, and all those smelly, ugly brown people in the global South, they can do the industry and they can pollute, and they'll pay us for their pollution. They can buy carbon credits.
Carbon credit, exactly.
And I think that's the vision that they had, but it hasn't really come to fruition. Like, Europe is completely deindustrialized. America, in my view, is cutting the umbilical cord, so now they have to fight their own wars, and now they're leaning on Canada to help them.
But that's why last week I was referring to the Boston Tea Party 2.0. We will have a clash again with the United States and Great Britain.
It's worse than Boston Tea Party, but this is what I'm saying. They've destroyed their economy because of this green vision,
green agenda.
So they have less revenue, but they want to increase military spending. Where are you going to get that money?
It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. No energy, no steel. Sorry. No energy, no steel.
They're going to use solar panels to beat their enemies over the head.
Yes, and the transgender, an archant transgender army with tampons on the battlefield. I think they understood. We were talking about this last week. I think they understood that they screwed up. The globalists screwed up, and they're starting to realize that they have to face a multipolar world, because you have Russia, but not only Russia. You have Iran, you have China, and the fourth player that practically nobody talks about because he's quite discreet, but it is India. It is a very big player. So you have those four great players, United States, Russia, India, five, and I can refer to the BRICS now. But I think the European Union, or Europe as a whole, is starting to realize, at least maybe old aristocracy, they're saying, what did we do? And Tim mentioned something. First World War, Second World War, same strategy. We will save Europe, we will save democracy. I think there's a lot of people who do not buy this anymore.
Okay.
I see Tim is taking notes.
I am indeed. You mentioned nationalization and taking control of all the industries and whatnot. Socialism, one of the elements of socialism that failed was nationalization, because they had a very bureaucratic approach. However, just-in-time business management practices brought in by the Japanese in the 60s and 70s from the Japanese Reformation after the war, the reindustrialization of Japan, introduced just-in-time services, just-in-time business modeling. That just-in-time today in large corporations is known as vertical integration, right? So now the challenge is,
it's funny because I read this expression today.
Right? Can we make, so the socialist question now is, can we make socialism work by aligning with the business world and adopting methods of vertical integration, right? Where the head office, the executive, they own the resource, the mining, they own the smelter, they own all the distribution in between, all the contact points. So all basically, cradle to grave. That's what we call that in business, right? Vertical integration is cradle to grave, and they control those elements in that process all the way through, because vertical integration is cost savings at absolutely every point, because I've reduced the middleman to almost zero, right? And so the question is, will socialism work this time if we use vertical integration?
I will make a difference between what you talk about socialism and nationalizing industries. I will talk about Quebec, Hydro-Quebec. 1944, 1963. The big project, and when I had the conversation with Matthew Ehret, we talked a little bit about this, how the fact that the private electrical company, when they were nationalized in 1963 and 1955, it permitted to have great development in Quebec with the Manicouagan power dam, and it created a population of engineer technicians that were very educated, very, you know, Hydro-Quebec was the world leader in high voltage transmission for many, many years. They were going everywhere. They had Hydro-Quebec International. After in 2004, they dismantled it. But the idea was there. So the concept of nationalizing the industry to be a leader, or to be the master who is leading the change, it is not bad in itself. If you do not confine intelligent people to a position of being just a executant, or somebody who will execute, you have to. So the idea of integration is not bad in itself if you do not transform it into socialism, meaning that you will start to use DEI and you will hire based on minority because you don't want to rely on competence. That's the danger of socialism in I would say the theoretical way. So the integration, I think, could work, but is it compatible with what we call free market? I don't know.
The only reason to integrate DEI, SEL, ESG models of thinking into business and business practice, let's just avoid the government for a second, into business practice, is to force its collapse. There's no other reason. No other reason. When
change the model.
You want to crush, you want the industry to collapse from within. That's the only reason to hire unqualified persons. The only reason. There is no other reason. It has nothing to do with diversity. It has nothing to do with access to employment. The only reason is, look what happened to Boeing. Are you kidding? And here's what happened to Boeing directly because of DEI. China enters the room. Because now China's major large-scale cargo and passenger aircraft industry steps into the world stage. And it's not right, and it's not necessarily because their quality assurance has surpassed Boeing. It's because the ceiling has dropped. The bar has dropped. It's exactly the same thing I said. You take the entire middle class. You don't pull out from the bottom. You push the whole thing down simultaneously.
What you're mentioning is very important. The fact that you lower the requirement, the level of requirement. So more people will be able to qualify, but they're not necessarily qualified for the job. And because you have those policies that are not intelligent, you could say, okay, I want to have, and we were talking about gender equality in industrial companies. Did you see a lot of women drilling in Alberta? No, because it's a hard work, it's difficult, and it is, I would say, more masculine work. Linemen in Hydro-Quebec, there was a policy 15, 20 years ago for linemen for women. There was practically no linemen. But I was managing women network operator. They were great because they had a more intuitive way of managing the network. Coupled with men, it made a very great team, but it was a more, I would say, skilled job, managing electrical grid. You need to know mathematics, you need to know physics. So they were very qualified. That was interesting. I would have maybe payment if you she's listening to us, Sue Kellen Dyer. What does she mean by center of excellence? Meaning that you develop a center of expertise?
I think she was
because I
talking
think
about
that's what was destroyed.
no. I think it was what you were talking about nationalizing, and you were the Quebec was the premier high voltage something something
Hydro's
something.
position in
Yes,
the
yes,
international
center of
market.
excellence. Okay,
Yeah,
I understand. I
yeah.
understand.
Because I remember there were times when Quebec would come home and humble brag about providing consulting and key engineering work on Brazilian and Argentinian operations.
But not only there, because me, I was part of those things, but BC Hydro, Manitoba Hydro, we had a lot of exchange because the grid are similar and the means of production are similar. So it was nice to exchange knowledge between engineers and managers. And then after that, in 2004, 2005, the exchange started to dry up. Why? Because you had technocrats that were arriving and implementing more. You mentioned, just on time delivery, which is not possible in an engineering structure. You need time to think. It doesn't work. So I think Sue Ellen, she's right when she's referring to that. What we could see, maybe it could be an increase in knowledge, but you need education for that. You need teachers. When I referred last week to France, they lost all their engineer in the nuclear domain because they destroyed their nuclear industry.
Yeah.
And now they're screaming, we need engineer. They call
Yeah.
back people who retired. They say, go fuck yourself. I don't go back. They don't want to go back. Who will teach?
Yeah.
You need people who are competent.
Yeah, when Common Core became a thing in the States a few years ago, and it crept into Canada too, we just didn't talk about it. I used to make the joke that NASA's next generation of physicists will all be Common Core graduates. They'll plan a manned Mars landing, land on Phobos, and say close enough.
I don't get the reference. What's Bobos?
Phobos is one of the two moons around Mars.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Right. So and your question, your comment regarding JIT and engineering and whatnot. An engineer doesn't say go get 10,000 of those. That's part supply. And an engineer says we're building one, and it will take 2 years to construct it from 16 different agencies and buildings around the planet to make this thing happen. Right. So when an engineer telling an engineer we want this in a JIT style, the engineer says, yeah, you go talk to the parts manager down in the warehouse. That's not me.
But the big problem with this type of approach, is that, let's say you say to an engineer, he will say, okay, I will build a prototype and we will test it, and you need an industrial base to do that. You need industrial companies who will say, okay, I will take the risk of investing or spending $20 million to build a factory and to test it, to see. And I need tax incentive. I need something that will promote my idea, that will help the community. But you need a government that will support this. If you don't have that, the only other way you have is, like you said, to integrate everything, to nationalize. But the risk is having incompetence.
Development on that scale must be like 99% private.
Exactly.
No subsidies, no getting in the way, nothing beyond like honest environmental, reports and whatnot, right? Like none of the nonsense, none of the media PR bullshit. You let professionals go in, private enterprise, private money. The government gets the hell out of the way. And that model has historically worked. The thing is, you got government gets in the way because they know that if they put in that one little bit of legislation that slows it down and goes from cost positive, like a net positive, profit positive for the develop, into potentially like a profit negative situation, then the lobby groups supporting that private enterprise will step in and grease the government palms, and away everybody goes again. And that's how you get there. So I can appreciate saying JIT doesn't work at that scale, but vertical integration does.
No, for yes, but there's a big
right?
difference.
Yep.
I made
Yep.
a comment today about Tesla and about shale gas, and the comment was quite simple. Between now we see a little fight between Musk and Donald Trump, which is for me a sign of immaturity. But
It's a game
Tesla was
show.
well, of course, but Tesla was subsidized $500 million per year for 10 years by the government, not including tax credit. So it is $5 billion. And the Tesla was capitalized, the most capitalized company on the New York Stock Exchange. Ahead of Toyota, was producing 50 million cars per year, while Tesla was producing 100,000. And now you saw this week with the little fight between Musk and Trump, Tesla lost $176 billion of capitalization in 3 days, just because there were those two morons, they fight on the social media. Maybe it is staged, rigged, I don't know. But the idea is that when you are an industrial, you need stability. Because if you will arrive and spend $1 billion, you don't want to see your investment go into smoke because you have incompetent people in the government. What we're seeing now, it's quite fascinating. It shows the volatility of the market, the instability of the Western world in a whole.
I'm going to jump in. This is turning into the Chamber of Commerce conversation. I want to take it back to the global level. What do you guys think is going to happen with this 5%, this drift to Europe? Me personally, I don't see, unless they lose the midterm elections and the Democrat rats get back, I don't see America letting Canada just drift over to Europe. What do you guys think, and how do you think they're going to stop it?
Well, it will not. I think it will not happen. Like I said, 5% on paper. They never, like Tim mentioned, they never put 1%. So how can they put 5%? Even if it's money, forget about it. Don't forget one thing. They want to reindustrialize and weaponize Europe. Good luck. It will take them 20 years. The level of missile that Russia is producing per month equals the 27 the production of the 27 countries of NATO in a whole. They cannot even compete at this level. It takes 20 years to achieve that. So they can be a nice. It's wishful thinking, and the United States will not permit that.
And how much of Europe's liquid energy, right? How much of their oil, natural gas, how much of that liquid energy is coming from Russia by surreptitious routes?
Well, it's coming through Turkish stream. Yep. Don't forget, after that, it's liquid natural gas. And I think it is 6 months ago, Russia bombed the big storage of gas in Western Ukraine. Forget about it. They were counting on the Ukrainian gas that goes through Ukraine and comes from Russia. It's finished. So Germany is deindustrialized, and it is continuing to be deindustrialized at the point that it is America, not the United States, saying, okay, come here. We will have cheap energy. Where does this energy come from? Shale gas in the United States? It's a fake. Where it will come from? It will come from Canada. So they will not permit Europe to threaten the sovereignty of the United States. Because don't forget, United States, it's not Europe. Europe, it's a big territory, but United States, it is a superpower. It is not the same thing at all. Yeah. And it is not China, United States, Russia, China, they are in a different league.
Yeah. Yeah. Europe is the drunk great uncle who shows up only at Christmas time trying to maintain relevance in the family.
You named it.
There's no more relevance. As a matter of fact, the idea that the city of London is playing, kissy with Europe at this point, when the city of London could say, well, we've got Anzac, right? We've got London, right? We've got Ottawa, we've got Sydney, we've got, was it Christchurch, right? So we have all of the larger Canadian colonies, because they've lost control of India, because India is into BRICS, if I'm correct, right?
Well,
India.
and yeah, they're Machiavellian too.
So what they've got left is the Anglo the Anglo the Anglo colonies, and that's what they've got left. And Canada should be looking at this, in my opinion, and saying, Britain, if you're going to play nice with Europe, we're not interested. So yeah, drank too much. The Canada.
No, he drinks all the time.
Canada might have, with a different prime minister, Canada might have been more Amerocentric. And I don't mean I mean the continent of America, right? More Amerocentric. But because we have Carney, who's sold both his testicles to the city of London, and he's their boy, it's going to be Eurocentric, because in spite of Brexit, Britain wants back in. And this is its way back in. Right?
Well,
so Europe,
they can try.
Britain says to Europe, we'd like back in. Yeah, but your laws, you did this, you did that. Yeah, but what if we bring our girlfriends with us? And Europe says, oh, a menage a 16, then bring it. You make it happen.
Right? Canada would be the fat girl. They're like, we don't want Canada.
Right? Well, you've got and so Anzac is going to be effective. And we see, if you look at COVID stuff regarding the Anzac nations, the hyperinflation with the Anzac nations, immigration and export with the Anzac nations, you'll see that we have all of these Anglo colonized nations have effectively done and experienced and responded the same way to these external pressures. And so when we talk about Russia being a superpower, China being a superpower, America being a superpower, we haven't even talked about Brazil and Argentina yet, right? You look at Anzac. Anzac has been positioning to be an economic superpower simply by able to, because it basically stretches a band of influence across the equator and around the backside of the planet. So it does indeed have a band of trade influence. So is Britain trying to bring all that back into relevance and then drag it over to Europe and say, this is our payment, this is us getting back into the party? And does Canada want to be part of that?
Well, Canada, don't forget one thing. Canada was excluded from the Five Eyes. It gives you a very good idea what position Canada is. We are what I call a liability. We can just discard Canada if we don't need it anymore. It's an instrument. It's an instrument.
So regarding my apparent posturing for the Amero, this is my country in as much trouble as it currently is. And this is my goal. I want Canada restored, or I want Canada to be strong and independent and a sovereign nation. I think the way forward to that is a strong socioeconomic relationship with Mexico and America and even Central America. And so I am in favor of a super state from Panama to Greenland, as long as the nations within that super state maintain their sovereignty. And I think Trump is interested in that too.
Yes, but I agree with you, but you need mature politician for that. And I don't think we have any mature politician. I think there's not a lot of people who are ready to debate and discuss and negotiate and not fight like bullies or teenagers. This needs education. To be a diplomat, you don't become a diplomat because you have a bachelor's degree in political science at Harvard. It is a long-term process, and you have to be selected because you have abilities to do it. We were talking with Payment, and Payment, he was born in Iran, and I said, okay, it's quite funny just to think about the posture we have, how we act. And Payment is a measured man. He's a funny man, but he's. I never saw him angry. I'm sure he is angry like me and you. But the diplomatic posture is something that you have to. It's maturity. I call this maturity. Maybe I because may I wasn't I would have not have been a diplomat at 20 years old. I was I think I was a
Huh?
pain in the ass. But today I'm a little bit more mature. But you need this in politics.
Regarding the anger comment, when you guys piss me off after the show, I go kick my dogs. That's why I have two dogs.
See,
Right?
that's going to get us in more trouble than anything else we say.
It's the property
Yes, it's
rights. I
not the
own them.
RCMP
Property
that will.
rights.
It's the
Property rights.
SPCA
Oh
will
my
come
God.
at your house.
The other thing. So Tim, you're talking about super nation state, whatever.
Yeah.
South America, Canada,
With,
U.S., Mexico.
is it with a Marxist flavor, super sleep?
Yeah, yes,
Well,
sure.
I mean, it's
Marxist
Sorry.
characteristics. But
if we have a super state, can I still be king of Canada? I guess that's my
sure,
rule.
sure, you can have an
Right?
upside down crown to go with your upside down flag.
Great. I'll sit on the crown. How's that? Make everybody happy.
Wowzers. So Andre, you're talking about how we don't have mature people. Yes, they're immature. I think they're all knuckleheads. But if you tweaked the super state and you said, we want a North American Union that gives you universal basic income, universal health care, public education that's dictated from the capital, all of these globalists would be on board. Like in the span of a second, they would stop arguing. The NDP would run and hug the Liberal Party. You know, they'd be like, "We're not splitting the vote." So they're all for super states, but not the kind that you and I want, which is sovereign.
Well, I'm not a fan of Warren Buffett because I think Warren Buffett always benefit from his position, privileged position. But Warren Buffett said one day, quote unquote, he said, "There's no such thing as a free meal. So free healthcare, so it is not free. I pay it with my taxes. Social security, pension, we pay it. Do we have something to back it? An industrial process, an industrial complex, real workers at all level? We don't have this. Not we destroyed it for 40, 50 years with the financialization of the economy. How we can rebuild that? It will not take 5 years. I'm sorry, even the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations, it will not work. It's not even 5 years, 4 years and a half now. Even if they disturb, like Tim mentioned, they disturb the economy to collapse it. How much time it took from 1929 to recover for United States? It took what 6-7 years, and United States entered the war in 1942 after Pearl Harbor. It took what 14 years before they were able to industrialize their economy, and after that it was the war that helped. So it is 15 years. Sorry, in 2014, when Crimea declared that they wanted to go back to Russian Federation, I was telling my wife, it is 5 to 10 years. We're talking about this now, 11 years after, and we have insight from Crimea. She was complaining today that there's no tourism. I said, there's no tourism because there's no economic stability. They're still in the old model 10 years after. So 10, 15 years, even the agenda, it's only the beginning of something new, in my opinion, that we will see in 3 to 5 years. It will be the beginning of something. Free healthcare. It does not exist.
Yeah, I think on a larger scale, not necessarily the changing of flags and redrawing of national borders, but the economic relationships, the trade relations, the military relationships, the alliances. Canada is positioned so that we end up on a horizontal alliance that crosses the Atlantic eastward over to whether or not they captured Ukraine, but all the way over to that, along that line, that boreal line, or a north-south alliance on the Americas, right? So we are moving in one of those directions, and we have to decide within which alliance do we want to be to ally, and what role do we want to play. And rather than have unelected bureaucrats or or autocratic rulers say, this is what you're going to do. And they use the terms we, which is nonsense because you're not the king. Shut the fuck up. Right. And they use this language. You say, no, we, the Canadians, the ones who own the country, the ones you said you spoke to, we want to be part of, and we establish where. And we say, and this is going to be our role because this is our identity. We do have one. Trudeau left the room and he forgot our identity sitting in the heap on the floor. We're busy picking it back up. So Canadian as individuals have an opportunity to say to their families, to their neighbors, to their MLAs and MPs, I am Canadian. You will not forget this because when you're gone, I will still be here.
Here, here. Awkward silence.
Awkward silence. Didn't we start that?
Because we Tim and I shut up so you can speak.
Oh, I got nothing. I wasn't listening. What?
That's why we're always talking. He doesn't listen to us. Just two old men were.
Yeah. There's no timer on the show except when payment starts to nod off.
I don't know. Do I have any interesting stories from the interesting adventures of Payman Ascari? I was talking to this woman. She was a PPC supporter. She's about 95 years old. She came to Canada in 1947. Like, this is before either of you were born, I imagine. She came here.
I hope.
And the stories, I hope. She's from Hungary. And, like, the stories that she tells me, she's completely, like, a completely different person. She tells me about how when she was back in Hungary, it was still fresh in their mind that the Ottoman Empire, the Turks, kidnapped their young, attractive women and used them as prostitutes. And she's just telling me this, like completely objective, not emotional at all. We're talking about immigrants. She said when she came here, the government gave her nothing. They didn't even have furniture. The church or something gave her a place to stay. Yes. A decade later, immigrants came in. They were complaining about the furniture. It wasn't new. And she got in the lady's face. She's like, how dare you? You're not entitled to anything. And then fast forward to today, they get subsidized salaries.
That's right. Yeah.
It's interesting what you're mentioning because you saw the evolution or the degradation. The difference between immigration and mass immigration is important. People who immigrate, they leave a status and they try to find another one. You will say there's a lot of adventurers or young people who want to go. When it's starting to be massive and organized and structured, you can understand that there's a goal behind that. And yes, it's true. Immigrants who were arriving in the 50s or the 60s or even before, they were not helped. But there was no health care at the time. There was no government health care at the time. It did not exist. So it did not exist for Canadians. Why it would have existed for immigrants? They were arriving in a country that was quite new, and even after the Confederation and. It was quite new and everything was to build. That's good. That's the concept of America was you go out and you go do exploration and you have nothing but you're free. It's not the same thing as what this Klaus Schwab is saying. Having nothing, you arrive at this free land. You take what you want. Nobody puts law and if you are educated, you will develop your economy. But it was not like this in the 40s. And in the 50s, because immigrants who were arriving, the second wave or the third wave, they were coming here because they wanted to improve their life. And it was not a mass movement. That's the big difference that we see maybe since 1970. I'm sorry again to say since Trudeau, since Pierre Trudeau, 1967.
To say you are a post-nation state means to deny that you have a border. So if I don't have a border, who the hell cares if I got X number of illegal immigrants crossing across Roxham Road or, the Peace Arch or whatnot? Nobody gives a shit. Like, honestly, I'm a post-nation state. I have what do you mean borders? What's a border? We don't have a border. Oh, we've got people who, you know, who make sure that when you drive your truck across that you've got all your papers in order. Sure, but and you've got, this will not change. They will get away with continuing to do this until average citizens say, you want me to pull down your statue? Here's some rope. Go do it your fucking self. I'm complaining to my union because this is garbage. Or someone goes, you know that they built a bridge for Roxham Road? There's a ditch. So the public workers went down and built a ditch. You're a public worker. The very people who are coming to take your job, you're building the bridge for them first. What the hell is wrong with you? So until people stop accepting orders from lunatic leftist bureaucrats, mayors, and other idiots who are out there doing the UN's job for them, they're busy being the hammer. Until you stop taking work orders from them and say, you want this done, you do it yourself, not my Canada. I'm not doing it. And until that happens, this will continue. What is the line? The beatings will continue until, right, insert whatever, whatever phrase you need here.
It's interesting what you're mentioning, because in Quebec now there's a conflict that is rising between the native people in the north of Quebec, because the Quebec government wants to change the legislature, wants to change the law about forest and how forest industry are able to exploit the natural resources. And the native in Quebec, they're starting to fight, and they say, we will not permit you to come on ancestral land anymore. And there's a big, and the funny part is that you have the union of the forest worker, which is the Fédération des Travailleurs du Québec. They are making an agreement with the Parti Québécois to remove this law if the Parti Québécois will be in power. And this person, I will not name her, but she's the president of the union. And she was in Dubai 2 years ago, I think it was for the COP28, spending $150,000 of public, not public tax, public money, union money. Yeah. And she was caught there during the COVID, and she had to come back and everybody was asked what you were doing there. What's your motive? How come you're over there? You're the president of a union, of a worker in Quebec. What are you doing there? So exactly what you're saying. They're doing the dirty job of United Nations because they are incompetent and they can be manipulated. When you cannot manipulate them, you will never access power. You cannot access power if they cannot manipulate you. That's a condition.
You pay me $300,000 a year and give me an auto pen. Let me show you what I can do.
That's it. So corruption is everywhere. Union incompetence, it's everywhere in the government, and we're all a little bit responsible for it, because, like you said, if they built a bridge for the Roxham Road, one day you have to stand up in front of your union and say, no, we will not do it anymore.
You know, the Lord Acton quote, power corrupts absolutely. Anytime you put a pool of money together and you put somebody in charge of that money, you're running the risk of making that guy corrupted.
Yeah. And any organization that restricts, inhibits, slows, prevents grievance and due process, that organization must be ended. Collectivization, the heart of collectivization is due process and grievance resolution, more so than a 2% cost of living adjustment every year, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, more so than a dental plan or other nonsense. The heart of the collective agreement is due process and grievance resolution. That's it. And when a union removes that, inhibits a member, prevents a member, slows a member down, or outright rejects a member. I have a teacher, a Christian out here in the Valley, sued his union to leave the union because the union policies went against his religion. And the government told him he wasn't allowed to leave his union.
Yes, it's exactly like that.
Are you kidding me?
It's a cartel. It's even
Yeah.
honestly, it's even a mafia.
The mafia. It's Hotel
Now,
California without, well, maybe there's a lot of alcohol, but it's Hotel, right?
well, now in
You can check
Quebec,
out, but you can never leave.
in Quebec, the construction worker, they will go on strike. We're in June, in the middle of the season of building houses. We are in a housing crisis, and the Fédération des Travailleurs du Québec, with the construction worker, they say we will go on strike. The union was sending some representative of the union on where they're building houses, and one of the contractors said, "You don't come here." He said, and the representative of the union said, "I want to talk to the worker. They are a member of the union." He says, "You don't come on my construction site." And it was filmed. It was on X. It was very funny because they practically started to fight. And the contractor said, "I'm calling the police now, and you get out of my site." And now we're on the edge of a strike during the construction season. So you can imagine workers, they know that their union are mafias, but they cannot talk because there will be retaliation. And they're afraid of that. And I understand, in construction, in the construction world, harms are quite strong. So intimidation is always present. That's why you don't see a lot of women on construction site. You practically never see women there. It's a man's business. Why? Because they work hard, and they are, skilled worker, but they're not intellectual. When it will be the time to discuss with somebody, they will discuss with their fist, and it will not be nice. But I was watching this week, and I remember when I was at Radio Quebec, my first years, I was an electrician, and I was working with. It is another world, completely other world, and they don't, union. When I say they're mafia, they take people in hostage, and you're stuck with them. It's either you're in the union, shit, it is falling. or you're out, now your sign is falling. It's like Canada payment.
Yeah, it's like it's upside down flag.
It's prophetic. So unions are in effect racketeering and protection scams.
Yes.
Right. Only they act partly at the government's behest, because they are now a hand of the government, applying pressure to the employer, and they leverage the union members against that. And like I said, a union member who wants out can't. And as a union absorbs more different types of businesses and industries that it services, CUPE, for example, right? Public workers, I ask a really dumb question. Since when does a public worker get a union?
40 years, 50 years.
Hospital employees union. Aren't you paid by the taxpayer? What? I don't. Wait, I'm missing something here.
And we are so beyond that. Like, government shouldn't even be in a bunch of these industries.
That's right. That's right.
Well, so, they're all in bed together. They're all in bed together, and don't forget that.
Yeah. What I think. Yeah. Now it's just hanging there, right, Sue? It's just hanging there, helpless, strangled in front of the yard in the picture. It's just dangling. Yeah. If the string is over your own head, you're right. So you just got to get your.
It's not a string; it's a noose. It's a noose.
Well, it's a noose. It was moving a little bit, but now I think it's dead.
I knew you would say that.
That's a metaphor,
huh? Do you want to finish up your thought, Tim? We are just we're free falling here.
Free falling.
We're like you're
hang in there. Grab the end of the rope and hold on. Well, it's I'm getting to the point where all I want to talk about is Martin Luther King Jr. and our own version, right? Louis Riel, and the Winnipeg strike, 1905, 1909, right, somewhere in there, and to revisit the the good, the bad, and the ugly regarding the Freedom Convoy in 2022, because there are things that we will eventually talk about there that are not going to be well received by an audience, but they need to be talked about. So, but I want action.
It's interesting you refer to Louis Riel was hanged, and I will refer to the Patriots in 1930. No, why I say this is because those are time of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Those are time of conflict.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
they're also times of opportunities.
And he was a member of parliament. He was
a member of parliament. Yes, yes.
10 years a member of parliament.
We can take inspiration from that.
And the RCMP had a warrant out for him, and he took off to America for a bunch of years. Like, there's a movie for that guy somewhere.
So Tim, what you're saying is that we have precedent for hanging members of parliament? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, of course. In 1837, Pierre Falardeau was a cineast in Quebec who died in 2011. He was an independentist souverainist. I don't know if you know the movie Elvis Gratton. This is one of the most classical movie in Quebec. Elvis Gratton is the French Canadian who imitates Elvis. And he goes to Memphis on a contest, and I forgot his name, the actor. He died last year. That's a classic. It is a caricature of a French Canadian. Falardeau made a movie 1837 about the Patriots and how this culture of hanging people are trying to deprive people of their sovereignty. Yes, it's precedent, like Tim mentioned, Louis Riel, and all the patriots in Quebec were hanged. It's when I say uncertainty and opportunity, we have this opportunity to change things, but we have to be able to discuss with each other, not fight. Instead of maybe it's staged, the fight between Trump and Musk. But if it is staged, it is not respectful for people, because people, they will think it is true. This is not very nice. If it is staged, it means that they're playing with the feeling and the emotion of people. This is not a way to behave when you're an adult. So if we want mature people in Canada, we have to be able to discuss and encourage people to do so. Like Tim always mentioned, locally. Town hall, local activity to meet people. It's very important. It's staged, IRS stage for Tesla. I'm not surprised at all. Yes.
I think it's supposed to be is staged for Tesla or the IRS, the Internal Revenue
the IRS. That's why I was saying tax credit. Let's not forget Tesla was capitalized for about 15 years, practically without producing cars. This is quite fascinating. That was the first 2008 bubble that burst. And after that, Tesla kept on going. And they were producing, 100,000 cars per year? It's a joke.
So what do? We get a logo for Tesla, and underneath it the words.
Well, now we could drift toward economy and EV, because electrical vehicle, now it is funny because since they don't have they don't subsidize the buy of a car in Quebec since January, it is just collapsing. People are not buying EV anymore at all. It's collapsing about 75%. People, they say, wait a second, you were giving me $10,000 to buy a $65,000 car. Now I have nothing. Oh, I don't buy it. And car dealer, they're begging their customer to buy EV cars. So you can imagine Tesla is between. It's quite funny. Elon Musk had the plague in January because he was aligned with Trump. And now, because he's fighting with Trump, suddenly maybe we will see the stock of Tesla rise. So
I don't think Trump and Musk are fighting. I think this is game theory. I think they're playing at the overly public celebrity divorce squabble. This is
most probably they will be on Oprah Winfrey show next week.
Right. So I think what's happening is now that it has come to the open. So he can't dodge this. So possibly because it's what's it, $5 billion is too big, right? You can't run into that and just say, oh, we're going to get a pass. So he has to take the hit. But he's one of the single most well-connected entrepreneurs on the planet right now. And I'm saying that he can do all of these things, but he has surrounded around him the people who can make this happen. So his financial people and his development people, they already know sooner or later you're going to not get any more subsidies. We have to plan for that. So the idea that somehow Tesla has run into the wall of no more subsidies, I don't accept it. You don't get that big without planning for all the possibilities. You don't. Are they going to run into some difficulties at the time, the marketing or public image or whatnot? Sure they are. But I think he has something else planned. And I think that something else planned is an evolution in the battery itself. It's time for the car to reimagine itself, the Tesla, reimagine themselves and become something else. Because now he needs to differentiate himself from all the other manufacturers who have in very short order copied what he's done and effectively caught up.
Well, you know, in the EV industry, everybody's pulling out. Mercedes is pulling out. Toyota is pulling out. And you can tell all the Tesla owners in Calgary 2 years ago when it was minus 45 and it was a Tesla cemetery on the highway. You can tell them if they will buy Tesla again. There's a lot of people, even in Quebec now, people who were completely sold to EVs and we will save. Now they're pulling off because they said, shit, it does not work. That's a golf. My father would still be alive. It says, what is it? It's a golf cart. I don't play golf in January when it is minus 25 or minus 30. So that's the scam of climate change and green energy and windmill and everything. It's
Elon Musk. He put a post out today and he said solar energy is the only way forward. Like,
oh yes. I remember 2020. I changed my roof and I put an aluminum roof. And the company is from BC. It cost a fortune, but this roof will last 150 years. And I was watching the roof of Tesla because they have solar panel roof. Oh, it's very good in California. Shit, here with ice rain, storm, wind, minus 25. Musk, he thinks like a teenager. It will work. It doesn't work because it doesn't have any industrial process. It's quite fascinating to see. You're mentioning EVs. It has nothing sustainable at all. Cobalt and lithium is not sustainable. There's nothing sustainable in solar panel. It's made from silice and it is not sustainable. It takes a lot of energy fueled by oil to produce them. Windmill, how many tons of concrete just for the base for one windmill? It is incredible. And they say concrete it destroys the environment. So why do you use concrete? If you use plastic, use something. In the windmill, they have diesel motor and generator to start the windmill. And you see EV bus who has, they have diesel heater in the bus because the battery cannot supply the heater during winter. This is a scam from A to Z. It is I can deconstruct every aspect of those what they call sustainable energy, but many people they fell for it.
Yeah, alternate energy production is useful in context. And that's the way they should have pitched it. Not this stupid, fans blowing 200 feet above, everywhere in the world, solar panels everywhere in the world, tidal pumps, right? Because that's a way to do it too. Everywhere in the world, these aren't going to work. These are not going to work.
Is there any truth to this story?
Yes, this is true.
I shouldn't laugh at the dead, but
yes. Yes, I heard of this. It's true.
Yes,
He
yes,
commented
exactly,
about
exactly.
Vancouver. Yes, because Vancouver has too much cloud cover about 1/3 of the whole year, right? So
You
it's
know,
just not going
when you do a cost analysis, a real one, and you do not outsource the the expense, you understand that it will never work. Never. Okay, okay. You can have a solar panel to supply your energy. At Hydro-Quebec, when they started to propose to people to be autonomous, they started to install solar panel. Cost cost versus profit. You buy solar panel, it costs $25,000, and you will make money after 20 years, but the life expectancy of a solar panel is 15 years if there's not a tree that falls on it. And it's economic. They don't do economic. It's incredible, and people fall for it because the top decide by legislation. They decide that they will implement it whether you like it or not.
So and ultimately, I think all of this green tech and all of this green hype, the last 10 years or so, is the bulk of the tax money that's going into this is straight into money laundering and going into offshore accounts.
Exactly.
Right? Payment's going to go and remove the string. The that's wait, don't remove the string. You'll weaponize the tampon. That's how you capture a solar flare. Weaponized tampon.
Yes.
Oh, you didn't
All right,
take
problem
it? No.
solved. I'm a handy man. I know my way around string.
Good. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
String theory, is that what we're going after next?
String theory. I had something, but I forgot now.
I'm worn out. I'm out of juice.
Me too.
It's falling again.
Yeah. Falling again.
I think we covered everything for this week.
Yeah.
Except maybe the flag of Tim that is still up.
Yeah. Well, and so do the thing that
Still
payments
there. Sushi's either patient or she's
I think she's talking about the string.
listening to us for
talking
2
about the
hours.
string. She's just typing one or two words and hitting enter repeatedly.
Or maybe it is AI that is typing.
Yeah, right. What's that? What is that? Are you a chat bot, Sue?
You're already in the desert. You come across a tortoise. It's upside down. What do you do?
Keep walking because the obvious trap is obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The idea is there. We were federating. Cool. I will watch what I missed.
Yeah. Sue is verified.
He's voting for us. Too late.
It's the thought that
see you in 4 years.
What's going on with Pierre Poilievre? Like he's just
nothing. Who?
Yeah, he's irrelevant now.
Irrelevant, except he's still in Stoneway, and you and I are still paying his rent.
I told you he was watching the speech of the throne from Tim Horton close in Ottawa near
I imagine he hasn't shaved in days. Like he's got a beard and looks like a homeless guy.
Yes, but the sad part is the sad part is that he's he was a MP since 20 years.
No, Sue is correct. I have seen him campaigning. Yeah. It was not split. That's good.
Nothing else.
That's good. All right. I think we're done, folks.
Yeah, we're.
Hug your children.
Yes. Feed your children so they will have food.
Well, yeah. Until
the next revolution.
Let's bring it right back to our show title.
All right. I guess we'll see each other. But next week we might have to get a stand-in. So Tim, if you could do like a cardboard cutout, and we'll get your camera and
right.
Tim, you're very quiet today.
You're very quiet today. Yeah, I have nothing to say. That could be like Justin Trudeau when he had full-size cardboard cutouts of himself in the embassies around the world after he got elected.
Oh, did he have that shit-eating grin on?
Oh, it's so painful. Like I humble brag much. Jesus.
That guy's a lunatic. Okay. I'll see you guys later. A big thank you to the audience. Until next week.
Thank you.